Hi friends, welcome to QApedia and this is our blog qapedia.com. Today the topic that we are going to discuss is Waterfall Model, SDLC models and Waterfall Model. And the subtopic that we will discuss today are SDLC models, what is SDLC model, stages involved in SDLC model, type of SDLC model, Waterfall Model, what is Waterfall Model, various stages involved in Waterfall Model, how does Waterfall Model work, example of Waterfall Model, disadvantage of Waterfall Model, and when to use Waterfall Model. And then we will see summary of the session and then question for the session. So let's start SDLC model. So what is an SDLC model? SDLC model is Software Development Life Cycle Model. So the full form for SDLC is Software Development Life Cycle. Now before we discuss what is an SDLC model, we must know what is SDLC. We must know what is Software Development Life Cycle. Okay. So SDLC or Software Development Life Cycle is a process of developing a software. Okay. This is a process where software is developed. And in this particular process, we have to undergo below phases or stages. There are various stages which are involved in software development life cycle. So what are those various stages which are involved in SDLC model? Those stages are requirement gathering, requirement analysis, design, coding, and testing. These are the various stages involved in SDLC model. Now, there are different types of SDLC process which are called as model. We call them SDLC model. So what are those types of SDLC model? So the different types of SDLC models we have four main types of SDLC models: Waterfall model, V model, Agile model, and DevOps. And we are going to study each of them in detail in our coming session. And the first one that we will discuss is Waterfall model. So in today's session, we are going to discuss Waterfall model. Before discussing Waterfall model, if suppose you want to know what is SDLC, if you want to know about SDLC, you want to know about software development life cycle, then you can go to this this particular blog. In this blog, we have discussed about software development life cycle. So you can read this, or you can do one thing, that we have one video also on this software development life cycle in our channel, in YouTube channel. You can see that particular video also. Okay. So let's come back to this video. Let's come back to this particular session where we are going to discuss waterfall model. So what is a waterfall model? So waterfall model is the oldest approach or oldest model of SDLC. Okay. In software development lifecycle, this is the oldest model or oldest approach. It is also called step down model. Now, in a waterfall, any waterfall that we have seen, water always moves in downward direction. Right? Water always moves in downward direction in a waterfall. So in the same way, in waterfall model, all the activities or all the phases which are involved, they always moves in downwards direction. All the stages will come in downward direction. Okay. Now because all the activities or phases involved in waterfall model, they move in downward direction. Because they move in downward direction, that's why it is also called as step down model. Step down model. Okay. Now waterfall model is a sequential model. We start working on the next stage only when the previous stage is completed, so that there will be no overlap between the stages. There should be no overlap between stages. That's why we start working on the next stage only when the previous one is completed. Okay. Now what are the various stages involved in waterfall model? We are going to see all that. Okay. Now this is the first stage, first phase involved in waterfall model, which is requirement analysis. Now requirement analysis is done by business analyst team. So once business analyst team gather all the requirements, review those requirements, and then approve all the requirements, then the business analyst team will provide their input to design team. And after the approval, we cannot change the requirement until our testing is completed. So until testing is completed, we cannot change the requirement because we have already approved it. Business analyst team has already approved it. Business analyst team provide that input in the form of business requirement document or functional requirement document. We call them BRD or FRD in short form. Now the next stage is design stage. So design team gets the input in the form of inputs from business analyst, and this input is given in the form of requirement documents. So based on the inputs from requirement document, the design team starts designing the workflow and any other required flow which is required to start the coding. And once design team is done, the design team provides their inputs to coding team or the development team. Design team provides all these inputs in the form of design document. The design document would be one high level design document and a low level design document. So design team will work based on uh, the inputs from requirement document, and then they will what do they do? They will design the workflows. Okay, and once they are done, the development team will start coding. Design team will create design document like high level design document and low level design document. So this is the thing which happens in design phase. Then the next phase comes coding phase. Coding is done by the coders or developers, and they start writing the code, and this code is based on design document that they have received from design team. Okay, so coders or developers will start writing their code in coding phase, and the code will be based on the design document, high level or low level design document, anything on that they will base their coding will be based. The next phase is testing. So in testing phase, testing team gets the input from developers, and then they start writing the test cases. And once coding is done and the application is developed and it is available for testing, testing team will start testing. Whatever test cases they have written, they will start executing them. And if suppose some test cases are getting passed, they will pass them. If test cases are getting failed, they will fail the test case and they will raise the defect for those. Then once our testing is completed, our next phase comes deployment phase. So once our testing activity is completed, then the product launch is done. Product launch is done means we are going to launch the product in the production environment, and this particular thing is called deployment. So deployment is done in the production environment, and in production environment end user will start using the product. So this deployment is also called as build, and deployment is also called as release. So there are two more names for deployment, build and release. And this is the time when the first working product is launched in the market. This is the time when end user will start using the product. This is the first time when they will start using the product. Then our next phase come or next stage comes, which is the maintenance phase or maintenance stage. So when our deployment is done, our last stage is completed, deployment is done, and the end user has started using the product. So our product is already available in production. After that, the project is ready for maintenance. Now the maintenance phase will start. So what will we do in maintenance phase? The same test cases, that we have written in testing phase and we have executed in testing phase, we will execute them again. Okay, and those are not new test cases, those are the same previous test cases, but those type of test cases are called regression test case. And now because we are testing regression test cases, so there is a cycle that is called regression release cycle. So we test those test cases in regression release cycle. Okay, so why do we do this? So that we will make sure our existing test cases, existing functionalities are working fine. And if suppose any defect is there, because our product is in production, so in production also some defect might come. So suppose our end user is facing any issue, some product defect is there in production, then that particular issue also will be resolved during maintenance phase. So these are the two activities that we do during maintenance phase. Okay, we will resolve any production issue and we will test our regression test cases. Okay, so this is the diagram, this is the picture which represents complete waterfall model. The first is requirement analysis, then design phase come, then coding phase come, then the testing phase come, then deployment phase comes, and then maintenance stage or phase comes. Now how does a waterfall model work? We will see now. So how does the waterfall model work? Now we know that water always flows in downward direction. It cannot flow in upward direction. Okay. Same way, we can only move in downward direction in waterfall model. Okay. So like we can move from requirement analysis stage to design stage, but we can't move in upward direction like design from design stage to requirement analysis. We cannot move like that. And this applies to all the stages of waterfall model. So we can see this diagram, and in this we can see that these are the various stages, and we can only move in downward direction. We can move from requirement analysis to design stage, we can move from design stage to coding stage, we can move from coding to testing, but we cannot do the reverse. We cannot go from testing to coding, we cannot go from coding to design, we cannot go from design to requirement analysis. Okay, this is how our waterfall model works. So you see, if suppose all the requirements are finalized in requirement analysis stage, in this particular stage we have finalized the requirement. After finalizing the requirement, we send it to design team, and then design team will start their work. But if suppose design team says that there are some requirements which needs to change, requirements should be changed, requirements must be changed, and if they ask this to requirement team that some requirement should be changed, then the requirement team will not do it. Requirement team will not do an requirement team will say that new changes that you are asking me to consider, I can only consider we can only consider it after the current version of the product is launched, means after the deployment. Only after the product is launched into production we can consider the new changes. So when entire process will start again for the new launch, then only the new changes will be added. So we cannot do requirement change. Requirement change is not possible in waterfall model in between. Okay. Now let's see an example for waterfall model. It will be more clear for us. So let's take an example of an e-commerce application where we have certain functionalities like sign up, sign in, place order, or select product, or any many more functionalities like this. Okay, and these functionalities are called requirements in business analyst language. Okay, so let's say we have 100 such requirements or 100 functionalities like this. So what will happen? Business analyst will take some time to analyze these requirements. So let's say it takes 2 months of time for them because there are more requirements or more functionality. So it will take some more time. It will take some more time. Now, once they are done, once business analysis is done, business analyst will create business requirement document or functional requirement document. We call them BRD and FRD in short form. And once business analyst team is done, then they will give all these requirement documents to design team, and then design team will generate the workflows for these requirements. And let's say the design team also take 2 months of time because there are more functionalities or requirements. So they will generate they will take 2 months of time to generate all the workflow. Design team will create design documents like high level design document and low level design document, and they will provide those documents to development team. Then development team will write the code for those workflows, and suppose they also take 2 months of time because there are more functionalities or requirements. And once development team is done, testing team will write test cases, execute them, and it takes for them also 2 months of time. Okay, because there are more functionalities or requirements. So the number of test cases also will be more, and because number of test cases are more, so it will take some more time. Let's say it will take 2 months of time. Once our testing is completed, and let's say some defects are pending, then in that case product launch also will be delayed, and product launch will take some time. Let's assume 1 or 2 months of time. Then what happens? Our first version of the product or first working model will be launched almost in 1 year from the planning time. It will take somewhat, it will take this much time for our first product to be launched, first working product to be launched. So it takes more time to launch our first working product in production if we use waterfall model or as an SDLC model for our project. Okay, this is one thing. Now, so we have some disadvantages of waterfall model. So we are going to see that now. So the first disadvantage in waterfall model is very less communication. In waterfall model, the business analyst will talk to design team will talk to development team, and development team will talk to testing team. So testing team never interacts with the business analyst, and this is a big problem because if we want to write test cases, we should understand the requirements properly, and for that thing we must have communication with business analyst for sure. So this is the second advantage, miscommunication. So as we have already seen that the communication scope is very less in waterfall model, then we have a high chance of having miscommunication. For example, business analysts will tell something to design team, and if suppose they misunderstood and they will design it with their understanding, and the developers will code it the same way uh, from the inputs from design team, and the tester will test it that way, when this is not at all proper, because testing might look past. We might think that testing is past, a product is working fine, but the testing will not be done as per the expected result. So our end user, for our end user, the product will not be useful at all. End user will not be able to use it properly. Okay, so this is the second disadvantage, miscommunication. The third disadvantage is idle time. So when one team works in waterfall model, then the other teams will not work. Okay. So when the business analyst work, then the other three teams do not work. When the design team work, then the other three teams don't work. And same thing follows in this model. And this thing wastes a lots of time and money. Now why does it happen? Because we have already seen that waterfall model is a sequential model. We have seen it here. Waterfall model is a sequential model. We start working on the next stage only when the previous stage is completed. Okay, that is why we have a lots of idle time in waterfall model. There's a lots of waste of time and money in waterfall model. Then the next disadvantage is time taking process. So we have already seen that it takes 2 months for requirement analysis, and 2 months for design, 2 months for coding, and then 2 months for testing. And after testing, it might take 2 more months for the final product launch or first product launch. So this process takes 10 months of time, which is almost 1 year. And customer should not wait for this much time. This time is really more time. So this is one disadvantage of waterfall model. It's a time taking process and takes a lots of time for launch our first working product. Then no requirement change. This is the again one more disadvantage. So we have seen in waterfall model it takes close to 1 year to launch the final final product or the first working product, and we cannot do any requirement change until our testing is completed or our product is launched. So if suppose the requirement changes in the market, the current market requirement changes, or suppose people will start using some product with high technology or some advanced technology, so in that way our product will as compared to market, our product might fail in the market because it took somewhat more time for us to launch our product, and by that time the requirements have changed, but we did not change our requirement because we were using the waterfall model. So this is a big problem in waterfall model, that our product might fail because it takes lots of time and we do not do requirement changes in waterfall model. Okay, so because of all these disadvantages, we have some limitations that when should we use waterfall model. Okay, so we should use waterfall model as an SDLC model only for some projects when the requirements don't change, when the application is very simple, is not much complex, the project is short, and resources should be well experienced. Okay, so in these conditions only we should use waterfall model. Now let's take a look at the summary of the session today. So we have covered below topics in the session, and those topics are: what is SDLC model, stages involved in SDLC model, type of SDLC model, waterfall model, various stages involved in waterfall model, how does waterfall model work, example of waterfall model, disadvantage of waterfall model, and when to use waterfall model. And the question for this session is: explain waterfall model with example.